The woman who's jailed when she has like a child and a breastfeeding kid because she called a trans woman a man, she shouldn't have been jailed.
It's ma'am. You saw that video too?
Yes, I did.
Now, is that a slur? I'm making fun of that guy.
Oh, no. I feel like trans women aren't oppressed.
Well, he feels that way.
Yeah,
they feel
he
that way.
does.
There are language
but they're
laws.
white men, for the most part.
What if it's a black transgender? Who wins the oppression Olympics if it's a black transgender with rickets? Time for some bonus footage from the recent Change My Mind at UT Austin. Now remember, this Change My Mind setup was a bit different. We first let the students debate on a number of different topics, but I did eventually sit down with some students myself in the more traditional format, as you'll see here. Since the 4th of July is right around the corner, I wanted to include this conversation with Elise about why America is superior to all other countries. Watch, enjoy, and let me know in the comments section below what it is that you believe makes the United States the greatest country in the world. Happy 4th. All right. What's your name?
I'm Elise.
Elise. I'm sorry to hear that you were hit by a scooter.
Yes, I was.
Earlier.
It's not fun.
So we weren't even discussing this today. We just didn't happen to have the Build the Wall poster. But it seemed like you were passionate about this. I do stand by it. I do believe that the United States is the greatest country in the world. And if you disagree with me, you're more than welcome to change my mind, Elise.
Okay, I will say I do think America is great. I just think there are some things that make it not the greatest in the world. Maybe on par with some other countries, but not greater than them.
Okay, so which countries would you say are greater than the United States and why?
Probably countries that have universal health care and stuff like that.
Okay.
I feel like that's a big issue with America.
So like, could you name me some countries?
Like Canada and England and stuff.
What happened? Did someone throw something at you?
No, they started laughing.
Oh, that's okay. That happens.
I know.
Usually when I say something dumb. Yeah, so it's okay. So Canada or the UK?
Yes.
You believe that, or did you say Canada or England specifically?
I said UK, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and all of those they're in. Talking about any countries?
Basically, yeah.
Okay. You believe they're better than the United States?
Not better, but I think the US is on par with them. I don't think any of them are greater than, like, the other. Because
Okay.
I feel like, I just don't think America can be called the most superior country on earth when people are dying because they can't afford medication.
I do. Yeah, for a couple of reasons. Not only because our healthcare is better than those countries. By the way, did you know that I'm Canadian? I was raised in Montreal.
Oh, nice.
So, the death rates, the survival rates of serious diseases in these countries, particularly in the UK, 7 times higher if you have a serious disease or being in an emergency room than it is in the United States. The wait times, depending on the parameters that you use, can be anywhere from 2 times as long to 4 times as long. The healthcare outcomes are not better in these countries. And by the way, they're largely beholden to us providing national security effectively for the whole world because they don't have to burden that cost. So not only do I believe that obviously our healthcare system is flawed, but not only do I believe that our healthcare system is superior to those countries, particularly the country from which I migrated, to Canada, to the United States, but there would be another reason outside of healthcare. Let's assume that healthcare were better in those countries. Freedom is a big one. How can a country be better than the United States if they don't allow freedom to their citizens?
I don't think America really allows freedom to their citizens either all the way. Because once you've committed a crime, your rights are stripped from you.
Right. But we do assume that we grant everyone, we don't give any rights, we grant, or recognize is the term I should use here, I want to pick my words very carefully, recognize God-given rights to human beings here in this country that no other country recognizes. Namely, freedom of speech is a big one. That doesn't exist in those countries that you just mentioned. Is that not a biggie?
I feel like freedom of speech is very important. But at the same time, it's like, this is getting into the whole like freedom of speech, hate speech thing, right? Like,
No,
I mean like with freedom of speech being an important thing. I feel like there are certain things that are like more important than others.
Okay, so what's more important than the First Amendment?
Well,
What rights are more important than the freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of the press? What rights would you say are more important for a government to recognize?
the right to life.
Okay, that's also something that we recognize.
Yes, but not entirely. If you are too broke, then America just doesn't recognize your right to life. They might say they do, but then it's, you can't afford insulin, okay, you're gonna die now. you can't afford this medical procedure, okay, you're gonna die.
Right. I think you're misunderstanding here the difference between rights and commodities. Right? You have the right to live. You have the right to seek the best health care possible for yourself. You do not have the right to force someone else to provide you with health care. You do not have the right to have somebody else create, invest, go through red tape and FDA approval process, study, become a doctor, go to medical school, get hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt, and force them to provide you with medical procedures or drugs simply because you can't afford them. That is not a right. That's a good. That's a commodity.
But that's the thing, is I think that should be a right. You should
But it doesn't
have
mean
the
that
right.
it is.
You should have the right. But that's exactly what I'm saying, though. That's why America's not the most superior, because they don't see that as a right.
Sure, but we do see, I would say this, and maybe we just won't be able to agree. Freedom of speech to me is more important. I think that's a much more valuable fundamental right than forcing somebody else to give me free health care. You disagree with that?
Well, I feel like, because I do feel like freedom of speech is an amazing thing. It's great that we're able to sit down and talk and have debates on whatever we want because we have that right.
Right.
But
and it doesn't exist in these other countries. We wouldn't be able to do this.
But I do believe, like, there's just a huge flaw in the fact that people are dying because they cannot afford things.
But more people are dying in these other countries because their healthcare systems are worse.
But
The mortality rates, the survival rates of diseases like cancer, terminal diseases, not to mention the diseases that are not being cured in these other countries, the major treatments are coming out of the United States because of medical innovation and research, which doesn't occur under a socialized system. So if you're talking about people dying because of healthcare, more people are dying because of lack of access to good care under socialized healthcare systems than the United States. No system is perfect, but are you willing to give up your freedom of speech, your Second Amendment rights? But let's just go with freedom of speech. You're willing to give that up for a worse healthcare outlook overall, provided that it's given to you at gunpoint by another taxpayer?
if I wasn't allowed to say certain things, like if I wasn't allowed to, I feel like there are things that people shouldn't be allowed to say.
Okay.
Is the thing. That's
so you
my
don't
stance.
support the first, so freedom of speech is not necessarily something you support. Now this, okay.
I don't necessarily support people shouldn't be allowed to say, like people shouldn't be able to say.
Do not say fire in a crowded theater, please.
I mean, like that, yeah, definitely not. But that is technically, like, that incites a riot. Like, that's already not, like, you could already get in trouble for saying
Yes,
that. Like,
that's not because of speech, that's because it's a lie.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like people shouldn't be able to, like, we already have restrictions on freedom of speech here. You're not allowed to incite violence against people. Like, it's like
That's not a restriction
or
on freedom
not
of speech.
that. It's like in a crowd, you're not allowed to, like.
You're trying to think of an example. It's not saying fire, aren't you?
No, I'm not. That's
That's what everyone says.
I'm trying to think of. You shouldn't be allowed to, like. I shouldn't be allowed to go around calling people the N-word.
Why not?
Because that's a slur. Like,
Sure.
that's not something
Sure.
I should be allowed to say.
Why not?
Because that's an offensive word. That's a slur.
It's an offensive word, absolutely. Someone just called me a idiot. Right? Should I be able to have these guys haul them away in cuffs?
Well, no, I don't think cuffs is. That's.
Well, what do you do? What do you mean you shouldn't be allowed to say it? What should the ramifications? By the way, people shouldn't walk around calling black people the N-word, okay? I think we both agree on that. But you said people shouldn't be allowed to.
I think there should be.
Why
like,
not?
Because that's not okay. Like,
It's not nice. So what would you do to someone who uses the N-word? What should be done?
there should be like a small fine or something, like to like deter them from saying that. Like, people shouldn't be allowed to call me a like that's a slur.
I think people should be allowed to. I think it's mean.
It's a word that's been used to oppress lesbians for like years. Like it shouldn't be allowed to. You shouldn't be allowed to call a gay person a. That's like not okay.
Why not?
Because
Saying it's not okay or that it's wrong or that it's offensive doesn't
not-
mean that it's not a right.
it's like those words have been used in oppressing these people for like a very long time.
Okay.
It's kind of like it's those
For example, people who were in position, the N-word, people who were in position, I want to make sure that we understand and kind of save us some time. For example, with the N-word, people in positions of power, not only plantation owners, but people in government, right, who supported slavery in positions of power, use the N-word as a way to degrade and assert their power over black people, right?
Yes.
Okay, so these are people in government, people in positions of authority who use this term. Why would you want to grant the right to legislate language to people in positions of power or authority?
I just feel like
you're giving that power away to the patriarchy.
Those words specifically dehumanize people.
Sure, but the point is, someone is going to be determining what language is allowed or not, right? You want to give that right over to the government.
Maybe not.
You want Donald Trump to determine what you can or cannot?
No, I don't want Donald Trump.
Okay, so the next guy.
Donald Trump should be the president.
Well, who cares? So the point is,
I feel like that's part of why America isn't superior is because of Trump.
But the point is, right now, it's going to go straight to the top. You want him in charge of language?
No, I feel like it should be like a national vote. Like, that's what I think.
So do you believe that all rights come from a national vote?
Well, no. But
okay.
I feel like certain things should.
Well, okay, let me give you this as an example. In these other countries, like Canada, where I come from, you have comedians who've been jailed for offensive jokes. There's actually a friend of mine named Mike Ward, who was put before a Human Rights Tribunal and I believe fined $150,000 or $50,000 for a joke that offended a kid from a Make-A-Wish Foundation. You have people who are arrested left and right in Europe. In the UK, there was a man who was actually, I believe, fined because he was doing a cover of Kung Fu Fighting at a karaoke bar, and an Asian person said that it was offensive to him. When you have the government determining what language is and is not acceptable, that's a very dangerous precedent to set. Where's the line? What you find offensive might not be offensive to someone else. What someone else finds offensive, who may be in power for those 4 years, may be completely acceptable to you. Why would you support giving that right over to the government? Furthermore, most movements, civil rights movements, the LGBT movement, right, the gay pride movement, these movements have been created by people who would be presumed to be underclass or the oppressed, right? And they did it through language. They did it non-violently. They got legislation passed. Why would you want to strip them of their language or grant the authority to the government to strip minorities of their language?
I'm saying that we should make it to where people that aren't of the minority can't call the people of the minority slurs against that minority.
But minorities and majorities change all the time, right? That's the whole point to a constitutional republic, to protect the rights of the minority from a majority. Anytime you grant the government the right to legislate speech, it ends badly. It's never ended well. So I just want to make sure that maybe we can move on to another issue of discussion. You believe that these countries are better than the United States because they have socialized healthcare, and it seems to me like you believe that they're better than the United States because they don't have freedom of speech.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I mean, like, I feel like no country has done freedom of speech stuff correctly. I'll say that.
I would say the United States.
Because, like, I'll say, like, the woman who's jailed when she has, like, a child and a breastfeeding kid because she called a trans woman a man, she shouldn't have been jailed. Like, that's not okay. Like, I feel like there's a, like...
It's ma'am. You saw that video, too?
Yes, I did.
Now, is that a slur? I'm making fun of that guy.
No. I feel like...
But he does.
Trans women aren't oppressed.
Well, he feels that way.
Yeah,
they feel that way. There are language laws.
But they're white men, for the most part.
What if it's a black transgender?
They're men for the most part.
Who wins the oppression Olympics if it's a black transgender with rickets? The point is, you can't deter. This is the problem with identity politics, right? You just said, well, no, hold on a second. So, because he's a white man, he's not oppressed. Well, he thinks that, and you have these bills, you have these pieces of legislation that are being proposed that would outlaw misgendering people. I mean, you see that in Canada,
and that's
right?
an awful thing.
Why is it awful?
That's not oppression.
They see it as oppression.
Because someone called them the wrong gender. I've been called a dude before, multiple times.
I don't know. I hope maybe that was a guy who was hitting you on the scooter. Could have been drunk. I would never confuse you for a dude.
But like, so what? Like, that's not the same as like someone tried to like. Someone.
But they want to
and,
literally take your rights away. They want to do the exact same thing to you that you want to do to people who might use the word or
yes,
understand?
But I've been hit before with the word being hurled at me.
But they've been hit with someone calling them a tranny, or they've been hit with, God forbid, being called a man. being called man instead of ma'am. The point is they want to do the exact same thing to you, remove your right to speak as you would do with other people. Do you see the danger in that? And who determines that line?
I see there is a danger in it, but I feel like the thing is really it just comes down to, in the most part, like, people just don't care about each other is the thing. Like, that's why I feel like there should be regulations.
Okay, it doesn't seem like you're super clear on what the regulations should be at this point.
It's a very fine line to walk, is the thing.
I don't think it is.
So it's a very hard thing. Like,
I don't think it is. I would fight with every fiber of my being your right to say whatever it is that you want to say, offensive or not, as I would hope people would fight for my right to say it. I believe free speech is absolute. I do not believe that places like the UK or countries like my place where I was raised in Canada have it right. I think they have it wrong. I think it's an atrocity. I think it's a violation of human rights, one of the most fundamental human rights. And I think that far and away is what makes the United States the greatest country in the world, along with also really good healthcare and a kick-ass military. But thank you so much. Was it Elise?
Elise.
Thank you, Elise. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being civil. And I'm sorry that someone hit you with a scooter and called you a name. I would never do that.
USA! 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 USA!
Oh, you're still here. I'll chalk that up to our fantastic retention rate. If you enjoyed this installment of Change My Mind, please consider clicking on one of these boxes, I can't see where they are, to watch another installment, or I'd highly recommend considering joining Mug Club at louderwithcrowder.com/Mug Club. Not only do you get access to the full daily show and content that you can't see here on YouTube, but because we were recently entirely demonetized, it's the only thing that keeps this kind of content going. So we appreciate your support as public enemy number one of YouTube. We're learning how to navigate these waters. Maybe if we were more effective at transgender makeup tutorials or more advertiser-friendly podcast about transgender makeup tutorials.